Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show, and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to the B2B Growth Podcast. You are listening to the H2H, or the Human to Human segment. I am Carlos Hidalgo. I am CEO and founder of Vism CX, and also the author of an upcoming book, The Un-American Dream, which will be available on Amazon on June the 24th. And today I'm excited to have with me Daniel Rodriguez. Daniel is the head of revenue for Alyce. And so without going into any more detail, Daniel, welcome to the show, and give us a little bit of background about yourself, and tell us what Alyce is. And the spelling is Alyce. So tell us all about that.
That's right. Yeah. And thank you so much, Carlos, for having me. This is a treat. My background has been on the marketing side. I was running marketing for an enterprise software company called Seismic for 5 years prior to joining Alyce a little over a year ago. And one of the reasons that I joined Alyce, and maybe there's plenty of people that can relate to this, is I was on the receiving end of a lot of outreach from sales reps that were working at technology companies trying to sell to me, kind of as that kind of prototypical, VP of marketing, budget holder. And I think it was fair to say that I was getting spammed in every channel.
Yeah, I've been there.
Calls, emails, LinkedIn mails, direct mail, whatever kind of channel it was. It just felt like I was getting bombarded with a lot of what I would characterize as kind of me first type of approach. It was like, hey, are you interested in what I have to sell you? Let me tell you about my pitch, and it was very rare. It was super rare that anybody actually took the time and figured something out about me and did something that made me, I'd get like a package, and it would be this campaign that was like highly branded and all about what anyone else, I was getting like the same thing that 1,000 other people were getting, whether it was a pair of socks or a succulent or something. And it was like, I don't really care about these things. I don't want these. This is like, this doesn't get my attention. This isn't like what I'm interested in. And so when I had the opportunity, I got introduced to Greg, who's the CEO, and I had the opportunity to start talking to him about what he wanted to try to do with Alyce and really flip the entire script on how people are doing their outreach, like what sales reps are actually doing and how can they use the personal to, instead of making it me first or kind of take first, instead making it give first, and kind of changing the way that somebody then has an interaction with somebody else in the selling context. And what we then are doing with customers right now is in that channel of, hey, you've got something that's going to show up on somebody's desk. Make that thing that shows up all about them. Make it personalized to them. Make it about their interests. So if and Alyce helps the person do this because it's difficult to do this at scale, but if somebody's interested in yoga, make sure that you're then going out of your way to put a handwritten note and something about yoga, and then wanting them to have a yoga mat so that you can then start that relationship with them. But if they don't even want that yoga mat, maybe they already have that yoga mat because they're into
Right.
yoga, you give them the power of choice. Because again, it's all about them, right? So having them have the power of choice to be able to make a donation to a charity that they would want instead, or get something else that they would want. So we're really trying to, I think, like flip that entire script and really make it about the other person. And it was really
Well,
compelling to me. I felt like I knew what that was like, to be on that
sure.
receiving end. I left a really good job in hopes that this was like also another really great opportunity to help build something that I think is going to change the way selling happens and the way that marketing teams execute some of their programs.
Well, I certainly hope it does, because I think and you can't see me obviously because we're on audio. I'm sitting here nodding my head, and I've got to believe that a lot of people listening to this episode are nodding their head, and you see it all the time on LinkedIn. You get the connection request of, hey, I was looking at your profile, and then all of a sudden it's like you accept it, and then, hey, so here's what I do, and here's a link to my calendar, and I'd love 30 minutes of your time. I could literally fill many weeks just responding to appointment requests for 30 minutes of time. And I'm sitting there, and what makes me laugh is my whole history is in demand generation. I get more people who reach out to me and say, hey, we generate high quality leads, and if you need a demand generation strategy, I'm like, there's no way in hell you looked at my profile then. So it becomes, it's not only impersonal, it's almost insulting. And so what I have found, especially on LinkedIn, unfortunately, many of the connection requests I get, I delete, because I just
Yeah.
know where it's coming from. So I really hope you guys are on the cusp of changing that. And what it sounds like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, it sounds like you guys are trying to humanize B2B marketing and sales. Would that be a good,
That's
somebody,
exactly
the elevator pitch?
that's the vision that we have for the company right now. And when I think of humanize, I specifically think of the word real. Like
Mm,
if you're going to be real with somebody, you are going to know something about that person that is of interest to them. So
yep.
not just what they have up on LinkedIn, which is their kind of professional interests, but you need to know something about them around their personal interests. And obviously
Right.
not too personal, because you don't want to dive into areas
You don't
that
want to
aren't
creep
appropriate
anybody
in it.
out. Yeah.
You don't want to be creepy. You don't want, and we actually, with our technology, have had to build things into our own technology to help people draw that line, because we
Mm,
actually could, the technology has the capability to surface information that might be too personal. So
right.
we draw that line. And what's fascinating is how I think people intuitively know that, like, hey, if I'm being real with somebody, I'm connecting with somebody, I'm going to build that trust. If I'm a seller, I'm
Mhm.
attempting very much to really just build that trust, make that connection, get that conversation going. People buy from people that they like. And you're not going to develop any of that likability if you're just take, and right
Right.
away just trying to be like, hey, do you have 30 minutes for a meeting? No, why would I? Like I don't feel like I owe you anything, but you're asking for something right away. It's just not fundamentally how it works.
It's interesting to me that we're on, now we have technology. I came across an article that I wrote, I think back in 2010, so 9 years ago, about it's no longer B2B, it's B2H, right? Business to human. And I think we have a tendency as B2B marketing and salespeople to forget that there's an individual, there is a person on the other end of that email, of that phone call, of that content asset, of that web form, of the person who's coming to visit us in the booth. And these are people who feel, they emote, they have good days, they have bad days, they have victories, they have failures. And somehow we think, well, it's B2B. We're selling to a CFO, or we're selling to a CIO. And I love the approach you guys are taking in saying, yes, those are their titles, those are their roles, et cetera, et cetera. But we kind of need to shed that and say, let's get to the humanity of who is behind that title, who is behind that role. And I love that you guys are doing that. So, as you guys are using your technology, I also have to believe that this has got to be part of the DNA of your company as well. Is that accurate? Because your title, head of
Oh,
revenue,
oh
right?
yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm here for
and we have
revenue.
to.
So
The whole thing actually starts with the way that we're building the company internally. Because we have to
okay,
build something. If we're going to go out and tell people they need to be real, we need to be living and breathing that. But just to wrap up to your previous point, I think that people have done an amazing job as marketers of understanding that personalization is of value. And we've gotten, I think, collectively as marketers to this point of like, we are doing a good job of marketing to the persona. And the persona gets you like, 60% of the way there. I mean, like,
Right.
there are general characteristics, and HubSpot, I think did an amazing job in certain ways of getting people to understand like, okay, if you build out this persona and if you have these multiple personas, they had like a marketing Mary persona. So it's like, who is this person? Their age and demographic information and likely, technology adoption and things that they're interested in. And like, you kind of get there, right? And it allows you to say things that would be most likely to be relatable at a broad sense. I think that where things are going and where people want to get their journey that they've been going along from a personalization standpoint on the, kind of thinking about this from a marketing angle, is linking up not only just the professional persona to the actual personal interest, and then
Right.
giving those two pieces of information to the sales rep and saying, now go do your job better. And we're not, by the way, going to assume that we are the ones that are going to own those relationships, because that's not how this works. We're in B2B selling, right? Like, the rep is the one that is going to actually need to own that relationship with the prospect. So what is marketing doing to put the salesperson in a position where they're able to have the right type of personal connection? So that's just what I wanted to say, kind of wrapping up on what you were saying previously, because I actually love how you were framing that up.
Yeah, and if I can, let me jump in real quick, because you just hit on something about sales owning the relationship, which is key. And I firmly believe, and you've lived it as well, right? Where B2B marketing has gone through so much change over, let's just even say the last decade, forget about the last 20 plus years that I've been in it, but just over the last decade, heck, even the last 5 years. And as much as there's a change in B2B marketing, I also believe there's a monumental shift in B2B sales who say, hey, I own the relationship. I can do this. So I don't want to derail the personalization conversation, but I do either want to address that now or circle back to, how do you get those B2B salespeople to shift and say, we're not trying to take over the relationship, but we're trying to give you more information so you can be more personable, more likable, and actually personalize at scale across all of your conversations with would-be buyers?
Yeah, I mean, I talk to CMOs of mid to larger size, tech companies, a fair amount, as I'm trying to learn and developing content of our own, and trying to figure out kind of what's cutting edge, specifically in B2B. And I just get this sense, and I was speaking actually with the CMO over at Flywire recently, Angela McLeod, and she is, I think of her as someone who's like very much like forward thinking and visionary around this, where like the role of marketing is not to control and own the entire conversation with
Right.
the prospect. That is a fool's errand that I think has been misguided by some data that somebody misinterpreted from Forrester that said, oh, the buyer doesn't interact with sales until they're 77% the way through the journey. That's not what that data actually said. That data was not specifically talking about B2B selling. It was narrow. That data was about people who sell through like a more of an e-commerce transaction. And then that data makes sense, where it's like, oh yeah, no, people don't need to talk to anybody until much later. The reality is, a lot of organizations, their demand generation, the bulk of their demand generation occurs through BDRs and SDRs doing outbound outreach. And marketing, I think marketing's role is to enable sales to be in the best position to win in those conversations that they're having, in cold outreach, in warm outreach, right? It shouldn't be that marketing is attempting to kind of own something that's happening in this kind of marketing time world, which like, I think that marketing is kind of living in this like months long, campaign style world. And sales is living in like an to the hour. It's almost like they're in a totally different dimension. And I think that what marketers don't appreciate about the role of sales is that like they're moving fast. And if they don't have the things they need at their speed, screw it. They won't make use of them, So
Well,
it's up
because
to
the clock
marketing
sets
to
on these
recognize.
guys, the clock sets on the resets on these guys every 90 days. I don't know that there's a profession in B2B where every 90 days it's what have you done for me lately? So yeah,
Exactly.
they're going to be,
Some of them monthly.
yeah, exactly, right? Fail fast and go on to the next one. And if what you're giving me isn't working, I don't have time for it. So I'm with you on that. I agree, and it's a message I give to marketers all the time. So I love to hear that you're saying the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw it at Seismic. There was a bit, there's a, you're swimming against the current as a marketer. I think if you aren't trying to get sales to be part of your program execution and really thinking about how it's going to work for them. It's like, hey, sales, I am ceding control to you because I trust that you are going to make the best use of this thing that I'm giving you in this moment, whether that's the right collateral or whether that's, a gift or a piece of swag or kind of whatever the things are. Like that's for sales to actually be able to execute and marketing to kind of run and programatize, but not to just do it off in their own silo and then like hope and pray that some result will come on the sales side.
Or that sales, I always love that we develop the campaign and then we flip it over to the wall of sales. Like sales is going to be like, oh, thank you so much. This is fantastic. So with that, we're not only is it incumbent upon the salespeople to recognize the person. What you're also doing is saying, and I love what you said, the persona gets you 60% of the way there from a marketing perspective. And I would even say in a lot of the personas that I see in organizations, you kind of say, all right, the persona you built has only got you 40% of the way there because you still don't really have any detail around what kind of content do they prefer, what channels do they use. My friend Alex Shootman, who's now at Workfront, CEO of Workfront, talks about the customer watering holes and things like that. So you guys are really, dare I say, create a category, but really kind of saying, we want to create a category around human B2B interaction on both the marketing and the sales side. So are you guys, what are you doing to really promote that where the marketers I come into contact with are so stressed out. You mentioned it. They're so campaign, i.e. tactic driven. How do you get them to take a step back and go, guys, this is all about the people that we are marketing to? Stop worrying about tactics and first tap into who they are. How are you guys going about it? Maybe you have a client story you can share that kind of started with one from tactics to human. I think that transformation is fascinating.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you are correct. We are attempting to create a category. We just don't know what we want to call it yet.
Yep.
But right now we're talking a lot about, humanizing B2B. We talk a lot about, this give first rather than take first
Yep.
approach. And we talk about what it means to kind of be, being real, and what is it like to actually be real in that outbound interaction. Like how can we kind of connect people to each other better? So part of how we are then trying to create this category is actually finding the right forward thinking people that want to partner with us, right? To then take this approach that we are espousing and then bring it to their own demand generation efforts and their own ways that they're interacting with their prospects and customers. So it does take, I think, kind of alignment at that level where you have senior leadership at a company that is also saying like that's part of what we need to do as part of our own brand, as part of how we want people to think of us, right? We need people to think of us at this kind of like we're connecting with you at this personal level, whether that means it's a really competitive environment for them and they know that they need their reps to actually have that, or whether it's like a big greenfield opportunity and they need to be able to do things to kind of cut through all of that noise that's happening out there. So like a company like Marketo, which is a great customer, and we think of them as a partner, but they're a great customer of ours. They have a mandate from the CEO, and obviously they were recently acquired by Adobe, so it's Marketo at Adobe.
Right.
But on the Marketo side, the CEO of Marketo has been out there talking about what does the future of personalization look like, and
Right.
that's strategically very important for them as an organization, so that they can continue to stay cutting edge and be the leader in the enterprise solution set that they're building around personalization. And so when we were then talking to some senior folks over there, so Dave Rigotti, who is the VP of worldwide ABM there, at Demand Gen, he firmly believes, that part of what he needs to do from an execution standpoint is aligning to Marketo's vision about what is like the next version of personalization looking like. And so when we then started talking to him, he was like, if we're just buying like 1,000 Marketo shirts and sending them out to prospects, or buying 1,000 succulents, or these, whatever the latest like so thing du jour is, that people are going to send out, like that's like gimmicky spam, right? And that is doing the same thing with like a direct mail channel that you would be doing with any of your other channels, and it's kind of crap, right? And like he firmly believed that they need to be, if they're going to be doing anything with direct mail, they needed to be making it all about the person.
Right.
So that was kind of where we then aligned, and we're looking for people. There are good fits for us, as we are in this kind of like early scaling phase as a company, and then there are less good fits, and we are looking for people that are interested in this as an approach, right? That they value what we are trying to help them accomplish, because if they're not, and just then you could be spamming people still, and that doesn't accomplish anything from what we see, and it's not going to really make people successful either. So we're looking for people that really believe in this approach, this kind of give first approach, this bring the human to B2B sales and marketing approach.
And I love that, and I applaud it. I'm a big fan. As I said, I've been writing about it for a long time and talked to my clients about it. Let me shift a little bit, because you mentioned marketing technology. And I am in no way, by my question, going after Marketo. I'm a big fan of Marketo. I've got a lot of clients that are on the platform. I love what they've done, and I tip my hat to them. But if you look at the latest super graphic by Scott Brinker, and for those who are listening, don't shoot the messenger. Scott is a messenger. He doesn't create all this stuff. We have what I and several others are calling the MarTech industrial complex. It is like, and I go back to my early, my days at McAfee, when we were on spreadsheets and we had a bespoke, homegrown technology that marketing used that we all affectionately called POS. You can figure that one out. So we didn't have technology, right? And now, fast forward, less than 2 decades later, there's over 7,000 MarTech. And what I see is marketers like the California Gold Rush going, we have to have that. I'll take one of those. I'll take, it's like Oprah, technology for you, technology for you, technology for you. Does technology run the risk? Do we as marketers run the risk of buying too much technology, and as a result of that, dehumanizing our communication because we are so in love with the shiny new toy?
Oh, yes, for sure. Right. I mean, like, there's so many technology vendors that proliferate the problem of silver bullet syndrome, right?
Yeah.
If you just buy this technology, it's going to then be this silver bullet that is going to help you, achieve more results with having to do less work, basically, is like the general thing that everything comes down to. And I think that it's really, really important that people first come at things from a strategic perspective of what are they really trying to accomplish. Flipping that around and then testing it against what does that mean for the recipient. So if we then use this technology well, what happens to our recipient? So are they going to, is this just allowing us to spend less time and energy doing something that basically comes across as spam, right? From like a channels perspective, right? That would be like one example of that. So I think it's really, really important that marketers understand, what is this actually going to then mean for our prospects? How are they going to feel about this? And I would argue that the first question should be, are they going to feel like an actual human and special, and that something happened that was really thoughtful and unique, and that they have a greater degree of trustworthiness now that they're feeling, or reciprocity, or likability, and all these for fans of the Cialdini's principles, right? Like, this is kind of like, these are the foundational pieces that we should be going after. If we care about human, that means we need to be investing in things that drive these emotional behaviors. So while that seems like a little bit academic and wonky, like, that's the freaking science behind the human nature that we are trying to tap into as marketers. And if we are buying technology that is basically just solving for our internal pain of, hey, can you just like help me do this thing so I don't have to spend as much time doing it? Or I don't have to hire 3 people to do this thing, but the end result doesn't yield anything like that, it's crap. Like, don't do that. So I think that a lot of those technologies are not going to survive, and they won't break out for sure, right? There's a lot of little technologies. When you look at that like chart,
Oh,
there are
yeah.
not very many billion-dollar valuation companies on that, right? So I think it's really important. And I would say the last thing too there, my word of caution to marketers is, everything that is worth investing in is going to also be worth, it's going to require some type of change process internally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's good technology, that means you're probably doing something differently than you were doing before. And that, whether that means you're just automating something, or you are then changing the process that you have in order to execute something. So, like, make sure that you understand the investment that you're making in the technology needs to have a matching investment from a, it doesn't be not dollar for dollar, I'm saying, but just like that you think about, how is it going to need to get implemented? What process communication needs to be, what training do we need to then have to make sure the sales team is taking a new set of actions in the right way for the adoption of that solution? Do we need to then hire anybody to do anything differently at our company because we have this technology? I think that's like the critical piece. People buy the shiny object, they think it's a silver bullet, or they think all they have to do is buy the thing. And I don't really know of any exceptionally good technology that is being utilized by sales marketing teams that doesn't also require some work to actually make sure that it's being effective.
So you just used a word that invokes fear in, I would guess, 92.5% of human beings, and that is called change.
Yes.
especially when we're talking about work. And I talk about change a lot, but in my own real life, like, I go to a restaurant and my wife's like, hey, why don't we? And I'm like, well, why would I try that? I like this. I know this is going to be good. Why would I change? Right. So we all have our different relationships with change. And I'm so glad that you brought that up in terms of technology. And some of the changes are small, some of them are rather big. But when you talk about process change, especially with sales and marketing, holy Moses, that can cause so much consternation and weeping and gnashing of teeth in organizations. So if I was a CMO and I said to you, hey, Daniel, I want to do this, here's the change that we've identified, what would you say to me? Hey, here are 3, maybe 5 things. And again, I hate the quick tips because that makes it seem like I can roll out change on Friday and it's part of our DNA on Monday. And we know that's not true, despite who says it. What are some things that I should consider as a marketing or sales leader who's listening to this to say, here are some things I need to do to prepare my organization to not just for the change, but to embrace the change?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I was talking to an expert on how do you roll out ABM change, Kathy Maki,
Mm-hmm.
and she works with organizations doing a lot of ABM strategy consultant work. And she said, it's so critically important that you have a charter for what you are attempting to do. And I think quality change management needs a charter that includes alignment between the key stakeholders, and then also has somebody who is actually kind of owning this thing, whether that's their full-time job or it's just like a piece of a project that they're owning, that they are the person that's saying, this is what I'm going to do. And then having some way of communicating to people the progress that has been made in the change management itself. So, an example of a new technology getting rolled out and then wanting there to be a certain adoption so that you're then proving that you've gotten to a point of new results happening, maybe even before you can measure the actual results, but then being able to go back and say, okay, here are the results that we're getting, right? We are improving the amount of pipeline that is being generated. But up until then, we needed to first say, do we have a certain number of people that have actually started using this? What is the adoption rate of this? Are we seeing like the interim steps that are happening? I think the biggest thing that doesn't happen well is internal communication. And I think it's really incumbent on the CMO to be a broken record about communicating that change. And if this is something that is then happening with sales as well, to get your sales counterpart to also be, locking arms and being able to say, here is what we are doing. This is why this is being done. This is why this is important. And then, because I've never heard of anybody being accused of over communicating an important change project. It just never happens, right? Like I think people get tired of it because they are bored of communicating it, but I don't think that other people actually are feeling that it is over communicated. And then I would say the last thing is find your internal hero, right? So, in both Seismic's case and Alyce's case, we have a technology, right, that's being really utilized by a sales rep. And the sales reps that are then strong adopters and are believers in the approach and then are seeing the results are the ones that we want to then prop up. Hey, look at Abby over at Fuse. Abby Crossan who's a really person. I'm not just making this up. Abby Crossan is like the aspirational sales rep that we see utilizing Alyce, and we want the other reps at Fuse to understand why she is so successful, why she's beating them and hitting her quota, right? And what she's doing, and being able to take what we learned there and sharing it across other customers, and that's a thing you should be doing if you're a vendor and have customers like that. But internally within your own company, find the person that's doing it well. If that's yielding strong results for them, you do want to replicate that person's success across the rest of the sales team.
Yeah, and I think what you just described is what Chip and Dan Heath call look for the bright spots, right? The fastest way to change is not to go scorched earth, is to say, what are the bright spots? And let's replicate that. So if you have that rep, and what rep doesn't want to be successful, and they all want to follow that leader. So just continuing that change, that thread along the change. One other thing is, and again, back to the human nature, you had talked about the heroes, right? So some people are going to see this and go, this is awesome. I'm going to use it. I'm going to throw everything behind it. Other people kind of want to dip their toe in the water. And then you also have those who are go, whoa, 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 I've been selling for a long time. I don't need this stuff. I've got my process and things. So as a leader, what role does empathy play in driving in internal change, and not to the point where you let the inmates run the asylum, but where you say, hey, people are going to come at this from different angles, and I want to bring the whole organization through that. And therefore, I need to kind of tailor my approach with some individuals versus others. Are you experiencing that in your clients or even internally as you guys grow?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think the empathy there, I think, empathy is a good word, but I think the empathy actually starts with, hey, what does somebody really care about? And you have to speak someone else's language. And, if marketing's running around saying, hey, sales, here's a program that I'd like you to run for me, sales is going to go, screw that, right?
Right.
If marketing is going over and saying, hey, sales, I think we have something that is going to help you get into the difficult to get into accounts, and you're going to be able to then finally catch your white whales that you've been going after for a couple years.
Yeah.
Well, now I feel like you're hearing me, right? Like that's empathy. And that's because I'm now talking about the thing that you care about, and your pain rather than kind of my own pain. And I think whether it's a fast to adopt, willing to change rep, or if it's somebody who may have been doing it for a longer period of time and is less likely to change, I think if both of those people are saying, yeah, but I'm really struggling to get into some of these key accounts that we're trying to get into, and I'm open to suggestions, right? then both of those people could be really good fits. But I don't think you're going to get the buy-in if you don't first start with the what do they actually really care about.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'll tell you, I mean, I before this, as I told you before we started, I love doing these because I always learn something, and today was no exception. I'm gonna check you guys out because I always have. And it's been interesting. I'm getting more questions from marketers asking, "Hey, what can we do to help our salespeople sell better?" And it's just such a great, I love seeing that move instead of the eye roll of, oh my word, sales is so coin operated. And, back when 20 years ago, that's what you heard so often from marketers is there was almost this, I don't want to say disdain, but this give me a break type of thing, sales. And now you're seeing marketers say, what can we do? And I love the fact that Alyce is helping that and helping drive alignment. So we just have a few moments left here, Daniel. My last question for you is, we talked a lot about your clients and some of the things that you're doing and the change management and the personalization. What is the biggest challenge you face as a head of revenue who says, I'm part of a growing organization, we're trying to create a category? What is that biggest challenge? And knowing that could change next week.
That's a great question. I mean, I think, I mentioned this before, but, it is about, we're trying to create a category. We're trying to build a movement here, around this idea of make it about the other person, bringing this human element into B2B sales and marketing. We are actually trying to be selective about who is the right fit customer for us, right? So if people are going to come in here and be like, oh no, like this is just a marketing only thing for prospecting, right? I'm like, you might not actually be the right fit for us because you need to have this approach. So it's finding the right people that are going to, make that change happen within their company. And then also I would say that we're looking for the right people to join our company. I mean, we are a values based company. I mean, we have stated values. You see them on the door right when you come in, and as you're sitting here waiting for interview, they're kind of looking you in the face. We are screening for these values. It's about give first and give consistently, right? It's about unwrapping the possibility of wanting to grow yourself 10x so that you are kind of improving, right? We're looking for people that can seize the present, aka GSD, right? And we're looking for people that are crafty, like a fox, right? That in a limited resource environment, we're a startup still. We want people that are going to be able to say, oh, we could, instead of paying that money for that thing, we could, do something like, that would be bespoke and it would be totally cool. And, it would be half the cost or a quarter of the cost. That's the type of stuff that we're looking for. And we reward people for that, right? Like we have cards that we give out and give them swag for exhibiting those values. So we're really trying to make sure, I think at this stage, because it's so critically important, we're still building the foundation for what we want to do. It's so important that I think we bring on the customers that are going to that want to be with us for the next 5 years, and the employees that also want to be with us for the next 5 years.
I love it because definitely what you build internally is going to reveal itself externally for your customers. So Daniel, if people want to follow you, if they want to engage with you, if they go, oh my word, this guy gets it, how do they find you online?
You can find me, I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm kind of lame on Twitter sometimes, but I'll go on rants from time to time. But LinkedIn is where I've been spending most of my time. So please connect with me there, and then you can also find out a lot more about about Alyce and what we're trying to do at alyce.com.
Awesome. And again, that's ALYCE. Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time. I know being head of revenue at a startup, time is something that is at a premium, but I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your challenges on what you guys are trying to do to create a category that brings humanity and humanness to the B2B sector. So that is going to be a wrap for today for the B2B Growth Podcast, the human to human #H2H segment. Thanks for listening. I am sure, as I did, you have 1 to 3 takeaways that you can apply. and I wish everybody a great day.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.